Despite a somewhat quiet release in December of 2015, Rainbow Six Siege has defied conventional wisdom when it comes to multiplayer growth. Rather than slowly losing players in the months after launch, Siege has all but exploded, becoming one of the most popular modern video games. At E3 in June, Ubisoft announced it had crossed 35 million players worldwide. Of course, with that explosion comes the growing pains of managing a community. With so many people signing into Siege every day, there are bound to be a few bad eggs, so to speak. Toxic players relying on anonymity to behave negatively and to use harsh language over the course of a match or two. This is nothing new. Games such as Counter-Strike, Team Fortress, Dota 2, or Overwatch have encountered similar problems throughout the years. Greater numbers mean a higher chance of toxic players making their way into the community. Today, no one is more familiar with that problem than the team behind Rainbow Six Siege. And like other developers before them, they're constantly looking for creative ways to make sure their thriving community is welcoming as well. So we figured what better place to catch up with the Rainbow Six development team than here in Paris, at the Rainbow Six Majors, where the positive side of their community is thriving.
It is indeed a factor that you see in every popular multiplayer game. Toxicity is not a fight that you will win. It's not a race that you will win. That's a race, though, that you have to take. The best job that you can do is actually try to negate as much as possible all of those side negative effects that toxicity brings. Toxicity, you'll find it in many different levels, from certain elements of gameplay that are creating potentially some toxic behaviors. Team kill, for instance, is a side effect of friendly fire that's in the game. So as a developer, when I take that particular example, you ask yourself, hey, I can remove team kill 100% by removing friendly fire. But friendly fire at the same time is, as you play Rainbow Six, is an element of tensions, an element of watching how you aim and how you shoot. So you always have to balance some of your decisions, but gameplay or the game can be itself a factor of toxicity. Then the traditional toxicity that you find in any online community, that is the usual racial, homophobic slurs, people that are raging, insulting people on audio or chat. And for this, we have taken, I think, two major measures. One a couple of months ago, when we are banning everyone that is actually on chat using homophobic and racial slurs, and now having the mute chat, giving the ability for any player to mute the text chat of any other player that may become toxic in how he writes or discuss with you.
Valcumping.
Are you a man or female?
She's in the bathroom.
Is that a gamer girl?
You only need 1% of a toxic community or toxic population to actually ruin everyone's experience, because we are by nature a multiplayer game. So if 1 out of the 10 players is toxic, that's all of the players that are getting impacted by it. So I think we need to have a strong stance about those behaviors. So you have already that mechanic of track 1, 2, 3, then hey man, sorry, bye-bye. There are though some instances that I mentioned before, like homophobic and racial slurs. It's direct, permanent. Cheating, direct, permanent. They are like behaviors that we 100% condone and don't want even to give a second chance when it comes to this, because they have too much of a drastic impact on the rest of the ecosystem.
Siege isn't the only game fighting this battle. Massive multiplayer titles such as Dota 2 and League of Legends have been waging their own wars against toxic players throughout the years. And as Remy is quick to point out, the fight against toxicity is about more than just discouraging negative behavior, it's also about encouraging the exact opposite.
There's also several measures that we are thinking about on how you not only punish, but also try to educate the people on how to better behave. There are examples that we like very much in other games. like the penalty queue, for instance, meaning that someone who has been for several times toxic as a penalty gets on a special matchmaking queue where he sort of has to behave properly for a certain amount of times or games before I can actually join back the public matchmaking or ranked matchmaking. And those are ideas that I find very interesting, in the sense that fighting toxicity is not only and purely about punishment, it's about the balance between that punishment and the education, and that's something that we have to develop. I think one of the games that we have been looking, or has been a source of inspiration, has been Dota and League of Legends. Those are two games that are having, I'd say, some similarities thanks to the heroes/operators in our case. So there's already also in MOBAs as well as in Rainbow Six a form of toxicity that comes from the peak of the operator. You have a favorite character, all of a sudden that's someone else in my team that picks it and I don't have access to my character. So some of the measures that those games have put in place are very interesting for us to watch. Not all of them are applicable, but some of them are very, very interesting. The penalty queue that I mentioned is part of Dota 2, and I believe has been doing pretty great for the game. The reporting functions that you see in both of those games are with more granularity and more better ways to define the type of offense or toxic behavior that you're facing is also something that we are looking at closely, and we feel is important to have in the future.
Op 4, last operator standing.
We have always wanted to feature a cast of characters that is very diverse. That's why every of the post-launch season has one female, one male operator. We are visiting so much different countries, ethnicities, etc. So that's something that we feel was very important, to bring diversity within the cast of our characters, especially in a fantasy or a context that can be very serious. And we are extremely happy and extremely proud to take liberties with reality. In most of the units or special forces that we feature in the game, a lot of them actually do not accept female operators, for instance. We give no damn about that rule, and we rather have diversity as the number one objective versus authenticity, if you will. You are also mentioning the diversity of the esports scene and the casters or the talents that are involved. I am extremely proud of what the game has achieved on that matter. I don't believe that has yet a measurable impact on how people behave in game. But I do hope that the image that it projects for the fans, for the media, for anyone who's watching is a positive image, and it's a long-term investment that should pay off at the end of the day. So I'll tell you, this is for us developers fascinating, because this is the first instance for us where, as game developers, you only think about designing a mechanic, a map, a characters, a story, whatever. For most of us in the dev team today, this is the first where we are facing questions about designing mechanics, instances, or features to deal with how people behave. Trust me, the human interaction is clearly more complex than any of the other design that we can think about, whether it's an operator, a map, or again a story. So all of that requires that we ask questions that deep down are questions that every citizen asks itself. You mentioned the parallel with Twitter or any other social media. How much can you actually push banning? What are the criteria? Do you need 1, 2, 3 strikes? Do you need second chances? All of those questions that are fundamentally interesting, because there are questions about ourselves, there are the questions about society, about respect, about living together, about animosity, etc. So it's fascinating, and clearly we will never get right the answers. We'll try, we'll fail, we'll adapt, and I'm sure Twitter, Facebook, and the others are in a similar situation where honestly it is so, I wouldn't say subjective, but it's so difficult as a question, philosophical question to grasp, that it's going to be a lot of trial and error before you end up having solution that maybe will last slightly longer than 3 months.